So I've heard this film described as a mix between Citizen Kane and Revenge of the Sith, and I really cannot overstate how accurate a description that is. Francis Ford Coppola has been trying to make this movie for like 30 years and absolutely nobody would fund it, and now he's like 85, so I guess he's reached a point where he realized he hasn't got much longer to do this, so he sold part of his wine business for $120 million and he's used that to fund this movie completely himself. And just that in itself is an interesting story. I mean, this is the guy that directed The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, The Godfather. You know, his legacy has already been cemented in film history, but he's still compelled to cash in his fortune and try do one more. And because he's funding it, he gets to do whatever the hell he wants. There's no one standing over his shoulder, there's no studio notes. For better or for worse, Coppola Unfiltered is exactly what you get. So if I were to pitch you on the central plot of this movie, it's about a young upstart genius who's trying to create a new utopia for modern Rome, but he's stuck fighting against the powers of the older conservative rulers, the populists trying to swipe power to themselves, and everyone else scheming for their piece of the pie. And to make things even more complicated, there's a love story at the heart of it as well. So it's that classical mix of the personal and political, which sounds really compelling. That description is probably what the straightforward version of this film would be, but again, because Coppola had nobody to tell him no, he got to do the wackier version that he wanted. And how on board you're going to be with that is gonna vary. Apparently Francis really encouraged the actors to improvise and filmed warm-up exercises that then ended up in the film, and so part of it feels a little disjointed. There's just random scenes, like there's one where Adam Driver is performing Shakespeare, but it doesn't really feel connected to anything else, and so it's sort of a weird experience where parts of the movie are really entertaining and quite unexpected, and then other times it's just really boring, and it's not helped by the fact there isn't always the clearest flow from scene to scene. Like, the plot isn't particularly complicated, especially in hindsight, but it can be a little hard to follow what you're supposed to take away from certain things. Like, Adam Driver's character has the ability to stop time, so you'd expect that that's going to be a thing that becomes relevant to the plot, but it's not. So it ends up just sort of throwing you a little bit. The world of this movie I really loved. The mix of the modern with the Roman is fantastic, and it's really cool seeing how timeless a lot of that Roman attire is, because it blends really well into that semi-modern urban environment. Everyone just looks fantastic. But despite how much has been reportedly spent on this, it does feel a lot smaller than I think the title would suggest. It becomes really clear at points that they're shooting on longer lenses to try and hide the fact that even though it sounds like there's 100 people there, they've really got much fewer. So when part of the point of the movie is supposed to be about the upper echelons of power and the building of a new city in this great empire, like, there just isn't the sense of scale that makes these people feel particularly powerful. Like, there's one scene that's supposed to be of a parade through the city, but it's really clear that they're limited on extras, and combined with all the very clearly extended backdrops, it makes the world feel really artificial. In a way, it has that same kind of look and feel as a lot of the Star Wars prequels do. Then the whole setup of this film is that this is a fable, so the very synthetic look does kind of add to the storybook feeling of it all. I do think the look of it does have a certain charm, but then there's parts of it that just look really amateurish. Like, they have these title cards that are supposed to look like they've been carved into stone, but they really just look like PowerPoint slides. It's one of those things that isn't the worst, but they just look slightly off. And it's like, how did a movie with this much money and this much talent not have that cleaned up? But even with everything else that you can point to in this movie that's slightly off, I think the biggest sin is actually just how dull Adam Driver's character is. I really like Adam Driver as an actor. I think he picks interesting projects, but even though he's playing a Charles Foster Kane-like figure, he doesn't have any of the charm or gravitas. The film shrouds him in a bit of mystery and scandal, but he's the least interesting character in the film, and there's really no emotional hook for him either. Again, he has the ability to stop time, but they somehow make that boring. Compare that to Aubrey Plaza. She seems to be having the absolute time of her life in this movie, and she steals absolutely every scene that she's in. A lot of it is quite over the top, but you can see the genuine ambition underneath, and those little moments throughout are really compelling. And even when there is some absolutely terrible dialogue in this film, it's really entertaining when she says it. But her character is zany enough to support that. Like, the other actors who've got more serious roles, they're kind of backed into a corner. And I would just love to know how the other actors felt about the film when they were making it. Like, did they think this was going to be a masterpiece, or did they know that it was all a little bit odd? Because as a movie fan, you want this to be a masterpiece. You want to see Francis Ford Coppola go out on this big high. But the film is kind of bad, but it's bad in a way that no amateur filmmaker could hope to achieve. It's really interesting, and I'm struggling to work out how I really feel about the whole thing. The man is taking massive swings, and it doesn't really seem like he's concerned at all what anyone thinks about it. This is the movie that he wanted to make through and through. And the thing I keep coming back to is that this is a hell of a flourish on Francis Ford Coppola's career. Most directors stop whenever no one will give them money anymore to fund their films, and usually their last few films don't have this amount of money to play with or such a high profile cast. And so it's kind of crazy that what seems to be his final film is going to be at this budget level and this scale. The man did not care that no one wanted to fund this film, and I hope from looking at the box office results he doesn't really care if anyone sees it either, because very few people are. But you just can't help but admire the fact that he got it made, and for better or for worse, he did it exactly the way he wanted to do it. If you have seen the film, let me know what you thought in the comments, especially if you really liked it. It's been really interesting seeing how there's a few real die-hard defenders of this movie. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything coming up on the channel, make sure to subscribe.